where you are joining from, and we're going to get started once I'm sure everybody can hear my voice and see my video, of course. So I'm just waiting on that confirmation. Welcome, welcome. Just put in the chat, I can see you and hear you, and we will get started. I'm just going to say, confirm you can hear me. Sorry about that. Good afternoon. Hearing. Oh, thank you very much. I see. Okay, very good. I just needed that confirmation because I know we can have some challenges where nobody is hearing and I'm just talking, so that is not good. Thank you so much for confirming, and welcome to today's YouTube live. It's going to be a very interesting topic. In fact, I got so excited preparing for this. My name is Nkem Sinachi Ago, and I'm the founder of the Montessori Home Education Academy. Today, we're going to be talking about Montessori and special needs. Part of this session, we're going to be doing like a book review of one of the books that I read that was actually titled Autism, the Montessori Way. However, before we go into that, we're going to look at special needs in general and how it connects to Montessori. You know, what is it really all about, right? Because I think this was really inspired by, some people have asked me at different times, over the past few months since I started the first cohort in March earlier this year. If I have special needs children, can I join? How will it benefit them? Can they participate? My child is not able to do this, my child is not able to do that, and all that, right? So over time, definitely I've drawn more and more interest, and I wanted to really bring up this topic so that we can begin to discuss it a little more. One of the things I wanted to point out was that during my Montessori training, one of the things I learned was really how Montessori started, and one of the first places where she had worked was doing a research in an asylum center, with psychiatric patients, and some of them, of course, children, right? And one of the things she noticed was how those children were not really being stimulated, right? The focus has just been that, okay, they had this mental issue or this other challenge or the other, and the focus was just how to treat them. Meanwhile, if you know a little bit about the history of Montessori, that's Dr. Maria Montessori, you know that she was a medical doctor. And in the process of being a medical doctor, of course, treating people, but there was a common saying or a joke that she could very easily recommend medication to you, as she could also tell you to just go and have good soup, right? So she wasn't always about, medication. She was also focused on, getting to the root of different things and also trying to understand how certain things work. So I wanted to start with a little bit of a definition, on when we say special needs, right? Of course, most of us will be familiar with the whole concept, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Now, in the context of education, right, special needs will generally refer to maybe if a child is considered special needs in the education field, it would be like, okay, he or she needs some support due to one challenge or the other, either medical needs, physical challenges, intellectual abilities or challenges, and even psychological. There's one thing or the other that is making it difficult for that child to be able to work with the typical, let's say, educational system, the typical classroom setting or the typical way of teaching and instruction. So in terms of education, of course, I know there are other definitions, but in terms of education, that is really what it talks about. So you have sometimes, we talk about autism, we also talk about dyslexia, we talk about learning disabilities and different categories of it, right? So that is all special needs. Now, before diving into okay, how does it connect to Montessori? How can Montessori help a child that has special needs? I wanted to go back in history. So I actually did some research using the Bible, right? So reading the Bible, I started because, of course, that's one of the oldest books. If you are not a Christian, take it as a book of history because there's a lot of history also contained in the Bible. We're going to look at some other examples of, I'll say, people that have had one disability or the other, or one special need or the other, at least as it is referred to in modern days, to now see how you can connect to this. So the first example I'll be sharing is Moses. So in Moses is this was referenced in Exodus 4:10 to 17. For those of us that are familiar with the story, it was when God was talking to Moses about how calling him to deliver his people from Israel, right? And how he's going to pass so and so message across to them. And even while Moses was asking, "Oh, how would they will not believe me? What is your name? What will I tell them? What if they say this and that? And then it goes forward to talk about some miracles, that God now showed Moses he could perform as part of, let's say, evidence to show that, okay, God is the one that sent you. We have the miracle of him. He asked, okay, what do you have in your hand? And he said, a staff. So throw the staff on the ground, and it turned into a snake. Then he told Moses to pick up the staff. It turned from a snake back into the staff. The second example, as if that was not enough, right? The second example was now to have, the second example was now after throwing the staff, there was also one about putting his hand in his cloak, right? And then brought it out. It was now very white, like a leprous hand. And then putting it back again and bringing it out, it was normal. And then the third one was now pouring water from the Nile on the floor, and it changed into blood. So these were all miracles that God told Moses, you can perform this, and definitely they have to believe you. Of course, I'm rewarding that. But while all these miracles were going on, all these examples about Moses' awesomeness, what was Moses focused on? He said, that I have a speech impediment. Of course, there are different translations. I can't speak well. I'm not eloquent, this and that. And God said, I will tell you what to say, right? Or he was still saying, send somebody else. And then eventually he said, is Aaron not your brother? Aaron is fluent in speech, so I will send him with you. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out here is how, of course, in the Bible, and I did some research as well, Aaron was 3 years older than Moses. Now, in one of our videos, I talked about how, hello, Joy, thank you for joining. Hi, Leadership and Parenting Solutions. Thank you so much for joining. So one of the examples in one of the videos that we did, I know when I talked about fostering the love of learning, one of the things that we shared was how important it is to have a prepared adult and a prepared environment. Now, the prepared adult, I also mentioned that it's not just the parent, because even the siblings sometimes, the spouses, they're all part of the prepared adult. You on your own cannot just learn and say you're going to start implementing, because even you can have maybe the older one is becoming, getting to concentrate, learning about things, and then the younger one is just coming, scattering all their work, breaking their concentration. There is a lot of work to be done. So the prepared adult is very key. And now we have here this story with Aaron being the one that is now the spokesperson for Moses. So Moses being called all the things he had to do for the Israelites, and then he had a spokesperson. So that was just an example. And we know that Moses ended up being a very great leader, and he even spoke face to face with God, as was recorded in the Bible. Now, that is just as far back a historical thing. Moses had a speech impediment. I know, recently, of course, we talk about speech delays. We have, sometimes the children start speaking later, or maybe they're not speaking well, or maybe they're stammering and stuttering. These are all special needs that can sometimes hinder, of course, without enough support, can hinder the learning of a child. So that was just one example. I have about 3 more. So let's just pay attention, because as I was even preparing this, honestly, I was having goose pimples with some of them, because really it was so insightful to see how sometimes, depending on what you focus on, you can easily get so roped into being the situation that you have, maybe with your child or with someone else's child that or if you're a teacher with your students, right? It's so easy to get drawn into that challenge that they're having, that you may not even see, like Moses, for example, the 3 miracles, see all the wonderful things, changing, God changing the staff into a snake, turning water into blood, and the other one changing his hand from, leprous to non-leprous and all that. But his whole mind was, I cannot speak well, right? So all these your messages is not for me. Now, the second example was something that I actually came across. I think it was a video. I saw like a clip of it, and then because of the clip, how it caught my attention in terms of, if you're someone that is into early childhood education, it's probably caught your attention as well. So I had just seen a small video where a woman was trying to get a child to feed herself. It's a very old video, and as I later found out, it was like 1959. So the movie was titled "The Miracle Worker" by William Gibson. Of course, when I saw the way the story went, I had to find out more. Who is this based on real life? And truly, it was based on real life. So in the video, the short clip I saw, the woman was trying to get to get the girl to feed herself, and then the parents, they had already, because this girl was blind and also deaf. Her name was Helen Keller. And then the woman that was trying to help her is Annie Sullivan, or Anne Sullivan. So was trying to help her because the girl was blind and deaf. Of course, the parents, were trying to pacify her in several other ways, feeling like her life is already such a struggle. They don't want to make life difficult for her. But then they found out that she couldn't really help herself do so much. Meanwhile, the teacher was convinced that there was a lot she could do, because as we later found out, even the teacher herself was partially blind or partially sighted, right? And this was from an early age. So Helen Keller, the story about her is that she became deaf and blind at about 18 months old, due to a sickness that she had. Now, 18 months old is such a small time, right? But again, one thing that caught my attention was this is the period of early childhood, 0 to 6. And then eventually, the way the story ended, she was eventually taught sign language. Now, you might wonder, how does someone that is blind learn sign language? Because most of the time, of course, it starts off with sign language. Is typically, you say, when somebody is deaf, right? Then they can use sign language to communicate, because at least they can see, learn the hand sign. But now you have someone that is also blind and cannot even see the hand signs, and in the video, and also with the research that I did, the signs were being traced on her hand, a combination of her feeling the people's faces and expressions, listening to their throats. It was something else. I was in awe of the story. And and Helen Keller eventually went on. Hi, Fisaya, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, Joy, that story was so inspiring. I came across it several months ago, and it crossed my mind again as I was preparing for this video. So I said, definitely, I have to share it. So Helen Keller eventually went on to get a degree in arts, and she was the first, deaf blind person to get up to the point of having a bachelor's degree. Of course, her educator, Anne Sullivan, was a core part of her journey, right? Her parents, Helen Keller's parents, in the video as it was shown. Of course, I couldn't get so much more in terms of history of how the parents were around her, but it showed that basically, because they were so focused on her disability, her eyes and her not hearing. And at that point, she was also not talking, because if she cannot hear, it will be difficult for her to talk. But eventually, she learned how to communicate, and even, I think, began to talk a bit in the process. So she went on to get her degree. Her teacher was such a big part of her journey and her success story. And her teacher was Anne Sullivan, right? So she followed her throughout her life, I think, even until she died. Right. So again, now you have another prepared adult, someone who knew that this child, Helen Keller, had more in her than just a disability, right? She was able to go beyond, okay, you cannot see, what can you do? You cannot hear, what can you do? Right. And then, a combination of course, a lot of team effort, eventually the parents beginning to see results and seeing that she can do so much more. They had to stop focusing on those things that she could not do and start off from what she had. So we looked at Moses. What did Moses have? Well, he could not see immediately all the things he could do. He could not even immediately see that the fact that he was chosen, the fact that even all the way back, how his life was spared and he was discovered, right? But that speech impediment was his focus, right? Helen Keller also is so easy to focus on the blindness, the deafness, and not see that there are many other aspects of her that were possible until someone discovered that, right? So again, we are back to focusing on the key things, right? And also having that prepared adult, having that person that is patient and able to really dwell on what the good is rather than, what might not be working well. There's a quote I came across by Helen Keller that said, if you focus on let me see, I think how I wrote it. If you keep your face to the sunshine and you cannot see a shadow, right? Keep your face to the sunshine and you cannot see a shadow. The way I look at it, or the way I translate it, is if you're looking up, you will see the light. If you're looking down, you'll be seeing shadows, you'll be seeing darkness, you'll be seeing everything that is wrong. But if you look up, keep a positive approach. I think that is one of the key things that you need to know if you're working with someone someone that has special needs, a child that has special needs. You're teaching them, you're parenting them, whichever aspect it is. As I was preparing for this, one of the key things ringing in my mind was that I'm not here to be a messenger of, pity, or trying to put anyone down, or trying to dwell so much on what is not working, but to be a messenger of hope, right? So let us just start from there to rephrase our minds and focus. Let us learn, even as we're going to go along, you're going to see so many things that are going to be helpful for you, either as a parent or as a teacher, that is going to really make you see that, there's always a way around, whatever it is, as long as we are able to keep that positive mindset and that positive outlook. So before I continue, please make sure just confirm we are still together. And if you're here, or if you're joining us at some point, if you have a special needs child, or you're working with special needs children, or if you encountered, if you've had some, please feel free to share. Yeah, very, very key. Positive mindset is so key. So feel free to share, maybe which end of the special needs you might be dealing with, and because somebody else in the comments might see it and might be encouraged and say, "Oh, I'm not alone," right? Or it's not just me. So as long as you're comfortable sharing that, please feel free, put that in the comments, and confirm you can still hear me. If there's any change in the network or the voice, please just put that in the comment section. So far we've shared two stories. We've talked about Moses. We've talked about Helen Keller. And then the movie is The Miracle Worker by William Gibson. And by the way, Helen Keller went on to graduate cum laude, so that's like the highest degree. The highest is like a first class, or something, like a higher level of even first class. I've forgotten how to explain it, but you get the gist anyway. So she did so well, with her studies. Meanwhile, if she had not been discovered on time or helped out on time at that period of early childhood education, 0 to 6, even 7 years, it might have been a different story. There's a quote by Maria Montessori. So this is going to be a paraphrase or a rephrase quote, but the message was basically the most important period of education is not the age of university studies. It's not what is my child going to study when they grow up. It's not what are they going to be. What is that thing when they're already 20 something years? The most important time is that early childhood period when they have the absorbent mind, when they are still so malleable. Of course, it's not like everything is set in stone when they grow older, but it's just so much easier. So if you find yourself, you're waiting for, when they're 18, when they become adults, when they do this, when they do that, that is when life starts. You might be missing the point. So let us focus now, because this period of early childhood is so key. In fact, the moment I started learning more about this, that was why I honestly just felt like I should shout Montessori from the rooftops, because people need to know that it's not university that is the point. It's not even high school that is the point. You need to start now from that 0 to 6, from when they are born. It's not for you to start trying to teach them all the mathematics and all the complicated things. No. But when you understand, how these things work, you can take advantage and you can make changes. If there's early intervention, of course, we know that it is best, the earlier the better. And it's also best in that period of early childhood. Oh, thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. So please, let's look at the charts. You might see someone that might be encouraged. And I know there are so many support groups for this. So, but here, the focus is really to help us to move away from what may not be working well and start focusing on what is working well, because these are the things that are going to lead to that growth, that are going to lead to that change and that transformation that we are looking for. And ultimately, we're going to connect it, of course, to the Montessori method and Montessori curriculum. Now, the third example I wanted to share with us is Cody Lee. Now, for those of us that watch America's Got Talent, you may have already come across his video. Now, Cody Lee is a blind autistic singer, as it was, written. So he has autism and he's also blind. I can't remember. I think the blindness was diagnosed. I know he had a surgery when he was just 5 days old, which he survived. Thank God for that. So on America's Got Talent here, he showed up, I think it was 2019 or so, at 22 years anyways. And even when he was introducing himself, I noticed he wasn't, his speech he was trying with his speech and everything, but his mother had explained that, he was blind, but she discovered, early on that he loved music. I think she said they had played a song and they noticed his interest just sparked while listening to that song. And ultimately, when you research about him, you'll see that he's described as a music savant. So SAVANT. So in fact, it made me to start going further in understanding what it means, right? And sometimes when it comes to autism, for instance, a savant is basically, I may not be pronouncing it perfectly, but SAVANT, someone that is exceptional in arts, in their memory, or in mathematics, music, spatial skills, and even calendar skills, right? So he is described as a music savant, and he was able to, when he started singing, in fact, I was blown away. Like, the song was something else, the voice was on point, there was nothing like even a stammer or a stutter. And it was just amazing, because again, it points to the fact of somebody discovering at an early age that while he may have had the challenge of blindness, while he may have had been dealing with autism, he was drawn to music. He was even able to sing. And then we begin to even learn more about how not only singing, but I think what was mentioned is that he hears music once and he can just replicate it, right? So he was also the first autistic and developmentally disabled person to win the show, the America's Got Talent. Again, we had talked about Helen Keller, who was the first deaf and blind person to earn a college degree. So you have a lot of firsts, right? Once again, focusing on not what they cannot do, but what they can do, right? And he's described as having an audio photographic memory. So that is a third example, right? So these examples are meant to encourage us and let us know that every child is born with greatness. Every child is born a genius in one thing or the other, or even in many things, right? So it is our role and our gift as parents to be able to patiently seek out these talents and draw them out, right? And be able to grow them, nurture them as they should be. Another good example that really blew my mind was Stephen Wiltshire, referred to as an artistic and autistic savant. So, SAVANT. Now he's one of the how I learned about him. I think I had seen it, maybe it was on the news or somewhere, how he flew over with a helicopter, right? Went over the New York skyline and then was able to reproduce that skyline from memory. So basically, he has a photographic memory and he was so drawn to landscapes. Reading more, I saw that at age 5, he began to show interest in drawing when he was at Queen's Mill School. And then at age 7, he started showing interest in landscape. So you're seeing these are all early ages. I'm not saying that you don't have discoveries at 12, at 18. In fact, I was talking with a friend yesterday and she shared on her WhatsApp status how a painting that she did. You know how you go to some of these places and they have you use this canvas and you're painting something, like an expert artist. But the painting that I saw looked perfect to me. And she was saying, in fact, she didn't realize she could paint like this. That this is the first time she was holding a paintbrush or something to paint on the canvas. I don't know if it was oil paint or something of that nature, right? So for her to have been able to do this, and this is at what age, right? Just discovering that she can even paint this well. It means, of course, at any age you can discover some of these things, but it also shows the importance of exposing our children to as many things as possible, because if we focus on what they cannot do, we may never be able to find out what it is they can do, what they are good at, because a person's talent makes way for them. I don't have the quote here, sorry. But it is what you have, that you use to get what you need, and these things that you have are talents, right? And ultimately focusing on what is working rather than what is not working is really the goal here. It is not easy. I'm not going to tone it down or water it down or make it look like I completely understand the challenges, right, of trying to manage, even whether it's a classroom, whether it's a home, trying to make sure that you incorporate and accommodate as much as possible the special needs of any child that we're working with. I'm not going to even water it down at all. It's not easy in any form, right? So the only encouragement that just keeps coming to mind is really focus on what they can do rather than what they cannot do, you know. And of course, in the book that we're going to be reviewing, one of the things she pointed out, the book is written by Rachel Peachey. So it's titled Autism, the Montessori Way. One of the things she really pointed out is how it's very important to have, self-care, care for yourself and have those breaks in between, because of course you need to take breaks, recharge, and come back stronger and stronger to be able to even harness all these talents that we're talking about. So those examples really stuck with me. I know there are so many more, and I believe that really there's a genius in every child just waiting to be discovered. We just need to expose them to different things, and not just those are preconceived ideas of what we should be exposing them to. If we only know about, if when we talk about sports, we only know about football, or if we talk about music, we're only familiar with the piano. If we talk about mathematics, we're only familiar with counting. Sometimes what you know is really, in fact, most of the time, what you know is a big factor or is a big limitation for our children or for the people that we are teaching. I was teaching the parents when we were doing the music and arts curriculum, those in the Montessori Home Education Academy, and I was saying, when we're introducing music, right, we're not just, so here you have the Montessori music bells. Let me see if I can play it. So these bells basically have the sofa notation, do up to the last. So there are two sets of it, and basically some of the activities that a child can do is playing one and then trying to match it with the equivalent one that has the same sound. So you're training the child's auditory senses. Now, that is the typical skill, right? But if you're familiar with maybe just only the piano and you don't even realize you can do this with bells, or you don't realize there's also the xylophone, there's the guitar, there's the drum, and you're just focused on, oh, I want to put my child in piano lessons. The child has not been exposed to drums. There are some children, in fact, I was listening to one song and the drums in the song were just so catchy. I said, wow, if someone has not even listened to drums, you might not even realize that you like it that much. Right. So exposure is very key. The things that we allow them to try. It's not like, I don't mean enrolling them in all the possible programs just to make sure that finally you discover one. No. Sometimes exposure is simply even within your house, right? Within your house, within the environment, within community programs. Let them try different things and see what it is that they are drawn to. You, of course, you make observations, you take notes, and that will be very helpful, right? To see what their interest might be. So, having discussed some of the, the definition and some of the examples of people with special needs and how they've been able to thrive and succeed with the aid of the prepared adults in their, in their life, the prepared environment, and even their experiences and the faith that people had in them, the focus that people had on their talents rather than what their challenges were. I wanted us to at least start off with that point before we now go into the book that we're going to be reviewing. So, as I was sharing, the book is titled Autism, the Montessori Way. I recommend it. I read, it was quite a quick and easy read, very simple to read. Again, I wanted to really find out more because even though I had learned Dr. Maria Montessori, part of how she started her method was from working with children with special needs, and then ultimately working with children who also didn't have special needs, but I think they were just described as poor. But she realized that the method worked. Okay, good to see you here too, Chema. Welcome, welcome. So she realized that the method worked for both special needs and even other children who didn't necessarily have special needs. But just the fact that a lot of materials in the Montessori environment are tangible, right? Before you start talking of things that are abstract, the first step in the Montessori approach would really say, show them, let them touch it before you start introducing them to parts of a plant, parts of a tree. You're showing them a picture or even saying, a tree has leaves, branches, and stems. You want to first take them outside and actually show them, right? You shouldn't wait until when they now start school officially. Then that's the first time that they're hearing that a tree has branches, right? These are things that they're seeing every day, right? So that's why the Montessori method is really, really very good and really very helpful and easy to practice at home with or without materials. So going through the book has 10 chapters. So we're just going to quickly look through some of the chapters. I just wrote like 1 or 2 points per chapter on what it really covers. But of course, I recommend reading the book itself. So the introduction was basically highlighting something that I aligned with. So the author, Rachel, said that when you learn about Montessori, you just have a shift in your mind. And I think that is very true. Personally, I learned about Montessori when my first daughter was about 3 months old. It was in the peak of COVID, and I was just one. It was like, what is really going on? It was as if everything had just come to a standstill, and my life was now just all about baby, baby, baby. Can I even do any other thing else besides having a baby, or besides taking care of a baby, or besides changing diapers? But by the time I learned about this method, my whole mind just changed, and now it's, instead of, let's say, diaper changes becoming such a thing of stress, or when is the next activity to be done, when is the next breastfeeding or the next bottle feeding, whatever type of feeding that is being done. Oh, what do I have to do next on my checklist of caring for the baby today? The whole approach now made me to see children from a completely different light. It now became something to observe, that, they are doing this thing that they are doing means that, or this is an example of this thing I read about, right? It becomes very interesting. They become almost fascinating. You're fascinated by what you're seeing them do. You're beginning to understand that, oh, they said the child has an absorbent mind. They pick things quickly. Once you expose them to the right environment, once you're talking with them, you're relating with them, you're practicing serve and return. They smile, you smile back. They make sounds, you try and make the same sound. They are seeing that you can hear them and even somewhat understand them, right? You're becoming a detective. They turn around, you say, oh, that turning means they want to pee or they want to do something. They do their hand like this, it means they want to eat. You become such an observant person, and it's no longer like so much work, but it now becomes like almost a research that you're doing right? And when you look at it from that perspective, it becomes really, really interesting and not as stressful. The stress is still there, definitely, no jokes, right? But it's no longer, it's now with a different mindset, which can make a big difference, right? So that was one of the things that she shared, right? The child's behavior, when you see a child running around, it's no longer, oh my goodness, this restless child. It's now, oh, this child is developing their skill of movement. Oh, that is his or her gross motor skills that they are building. Everything is now a skill, right? Because now you have that knowledge, you have that understanding. Our children are not just, they're not mini adults, they are full human beings, growing, developing, their brains are developing and all that. And it's not just, you're not just seeing them as one more activity or one more task to complete. So in chapter 2, she went on to share about brief history of Montessori. I've already talked about some of it, how she graduated medical school and then did research in a psychiatric clinic where she worked with children in the asylum. And what she noticed was lack of stimulation. So the children were not necessarily being given so much activities to do because, again, like I said, it's more or less the focus is on, oh, they're not feeling well, or they're struggling with this, struggling with that. The focus was just on that particular thing they're struggling with and not the things that they were not struggling with, the things that they could actually do to help themselves or to learn. And after that, she now moved to working with poor children in Rome and saw that even the materials she developed, the approaches she was developing was working with these children too, who didn't even have, any special needs or disabilities per se. So that was what the second chapter was talking about. And then the third one now went to an overview of autism and how it's a spectrum. There are different symptoms, right? And of course, there are some symptoms you might see. You may wonder, oh, does my child have this or not have that, right? Self-diagnosis is not advisable. If you suspect anything for any reason, seek, professional help, medical help. It's good, of course, to find out on time so that sometimes it might even just be, it's not for so much to change per se, but for you to even have some more empathy, right? Of course, all children deserve our empathy, deserve our respect, because knowing that they are small and they are smaller than us. Sometimes one of the illustrations that we're giving is if you go into a room, lie on the floor when our babies are still crawling, lie on the floor and look around. And that is really the kind of sight that your child has when they are moving around. And it will just give you perspective. Imagine walking around in a house with everything just looking so gigantic, right? The chairs are all high, everything is high. So one of the common things you will learn with Montessori teachers, and I think even some early, general early childhood, is sitting on the floor. So right now I'm even sitting on the mat, and so this shelf is on the floor. In case you're not noticing that, right? So you get used to coming down to their level. It's very important because if you can remember yourself being small and how big adults used to look and how big all the furniture used to look, how everything was just big, 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 and you're struggling to find your feet. So being able to understand that, um, being able to have that empathy for children in general and being able to understand, where they are coming from, how you can really integrate them and really accommodate them in our lives, and in the adult world, so to speak, because a lot of things are tailored, with the adult in mind rather than a small child, except it's like a childhood center, more or less. So, this chapter on overview of autism, some symptoms like eye contact with physical touch, some people reaction to scene change, repetitive behavior. And these are all just different ranges of things. So you don't just hear one and say, and you now diagnose and you start acting, according to your own diagnosis, right? It's good to get a thorough review as needed. In this chapter, she also talked about how, autism doesn't just define the human being, right? She shared some of the examples also of people that have gone on to do so well despite or in spite of being having autism. Chapter 4 talked about early intervention using Montessori, and one of the things she mentioned was the absorbent mind. If you've been following us, if you're familiar with Montessori, you know that the absorbent mind is the period from 0 to 6 when children are able to pick things so easily as long as they're exposed to it. Some other forms of understanding, you know that from 0 to 3, they pick this knowledge unconsciously. So that's why they pick knowledge, they pick a language easily. If you're speaking 2 languages, 3 languages to them, they are all storing it in different forms. And then 3 to 6, they begin to deliberately choose what they want to learn, but they are still able to absorb like a sponge very easily. So you put a sponge in dirty water, it's absorbing dirt. You put it in clean water, the same thing, right? So that's why that early childhood period is so key, and also why early intervention is so key, because it's easier, to change things around, to teach skills, even the ones that the child might be struggling with. You'll be able to see more ways to come about it, of course, if you are, being a patient parent and also being a prepared parent, prepared adult, prepared teacher. right? So the absorbent mind was one of the key things that she shared. She also talked about floor time, which is an approach where the child is playing on the floor. Again, I talked about the floor, and child is playing on the floor, and then the adult plays alongside the child. If the child is arranging blocks, like we have, for example, here in the picture, if you see the child arranging blocks, you also start doing your own by the side, and then you can form conversation that way. You can even just the child seeing that somebody else is doing that same thing that they're doing. It makes it even more like an important work for them, right? So being able to come to their level is very key. You don't want to be doing everything at the table or expecting them to sit still for everything. You want to make sure you're coming down to their level. Are we still together? I I hope you are all still here and hearing me, just checking in. Feel free. If you have any question or comment that comes up, as you're listening to me, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm also checking at intervals, even as I speak. So, serve and return, if you can also look that up. Serve and return is really about being able to be in sync, with your child. Be in sync with your child, what they are doing. Look at what they are doing, even when they're not talking well yet. If they're saying, you can repeat that thing they're saying, even when it sounds mumbled. The benefit of repeating what they are saying, for instance, is that they realize that, oh, somebody is hearing what I'm saying, because when you're new to the world, you're just a few months old, even a few years old, you're not really sure how things are working. So sometimes just even acknowledging the things that they're saying, even though you're not hearing it well, just doing similar things that they're doing at dedicated periods in time is very helpful to help to for them to connect with you, to connect with the world, connect with their environment. So those are some of the examples that she shared about early intervention and how important it is to begin to implement at that early childhood stage. So 0 to 6, 0 to 7, but even after that, of course, if you have the right skills and the right knowledge, it is still very much beneficial. So chapter 5 talked about the Montessori sensorial experiences and autism. Now, the Montessori sensorial curriculum, if you're familiar with Montessori, I think also if you check my website, you'll see some of the details. Some of the subject areas we have language, depending on your location. If you're in, the language can be Autism the Montessori Way. Yes, that's the book. It's great. Probably after the video, I'll try and get a link and everything and share with us. But you can Google it. You will equally find this. Maybe this edition. So, sensorial experiences and autism. So sometimes when it comes to the senses, I had an article that I wrote that pointed out how the Montessori method doesn't just look at 5 senses, taste, touch, sight, um, to eyes, smell, hearing, it also goes beyond that. We have up to 9 senses, I may not delve into all those senses now, but the Montessori method has a way of incorporating so many senses so that whichever one it is, so that even if you don't have one or two, the other ones that you do have can be optimized to your benefit and for you to learn the same things that, the child has to learn for a particular period in time. One of the examples she shared was the Montessori bells, like these ones we have here, which is developing the auditory skills. We also have the pink tower. So it has a specific dimension that it works with. The child stacks it all the way up, puts the biggest at the bottom and the smallest at the top. This is not even complete right now. I just took the smaller ones away. So this one is developing the visual sense, right? But of course, you can also begin to use it to teach mathematics because we have a cube. The dimensions are, multiples of 10 and all that. Then you equally have another sensorial material here. I think she also mentioned it in the book. So these are geometric solids. It looks so beautiful. One of my favorite materials. So this shows a cone. When we have a cone, we have a cylinder, we have a rectangular prism, you have a pyramid, all sorts of shapes, 3D shapes. Now, when I was teaching the parents in the Montessori Home Education Academy about this particular material, I didn't say go and buy this. No, in fact, most of the time my goal is to help you find alternatives in your home, because these materials are created to replicate things that are in the house, things that are in the environment, so that the child, while in the classroom, can still learn things that they would have learned at home, but this time under the guidance of the teacher, right? So that's why I say, if the parent is trained, you don't always have to go and do the whole full teacher training. But if you have some basic skills, if you even know the curriculum that exists, if you even know the subject areas and you know some of the basic things that are contained inside, you'll find that you can begin to create some of these activities, around the home and around your child, right? So if, for example, we want to talk about geometric shapes, geometric solids, and I say, okay, show this example, I might ask you, think of something you have in your house that has this shape. This looks like a soda can, right? So it means that if your child comes across this in the house, or comes across a soda can or something of that nature, that is an opportunity for you to teach them, the different types of shapes that we have in 3D shapes. If you're thinking about, a cube, I'm sure we have so many cubes in the house, cube shapes. We have the ovoid shape that is like an egg, right? So you don't have to wait for a special time. As you're cracking eggs in the kitchen, you're talking to them about the shape, right? They're learning about it sensorially, and also the stereognostic sense, which sometimes is referred to as the blind person's sense, where they're able to feel, touch, and even check the weight as well, to be able to understand certain things. So the chapter, talking about sensorial experiences and autism, was saying how important it is. And I think for even special needs, a lot of the time, being able to tap into multiple senses, because you might now find the one that is more heightened, even if some are not necessarily at the peak, right, or optimum. You might find the one that is more heightened, that is working well for them. So that way you can now work from the point of strength to now develop the point, that is considered a weakness for them. We also have another material here. This is a sandpaper globe that shows the continents, but it's a rough format that you can touch. You know, this is Africa, North and South America. So they can feel it, they can get familiar with the shapes. You can also, if there's any, most of the time, if there's any material I like to recommend at all to be bought, it's usually the globe, because you can make it at home, of course, but you cannot easily find a material that will represent the earth, so to speak. But for most of the other materials, like here we have another one. I'm just showing us because I wanted us to have an idea of what you might see in the classroom. Because when I say sometimes that your house is what classrooms are trying to emulate, you might not really understand. So this now is a material that is used to expose children to different types of surfaces you can have. So here you have, this is glass. There's wood, different types of wood. There's metals, with stainless steel covering, and so many more. This is like marble. So the idea is that the child will be able to feel these materials. They can even begin to pair it together. So if you pick glass and glass, you know that these are the same material. But of course, you have glass in your home, you have wood in your home. So you don't have to get a separate material except you have a classroom, right? What you do is to find these materials in your home and begin to bring it to the attention of your child, right? So again, if you have you're working with a child with special needs, or of from different angles, being able to expose them to as many materials as possible, as many sensorial experiences as possible. That way you can find out what it is that they like, which ones. There are some that they might be averse to, that they don't like the feel of the texture, maybe of some dresses on their skin, or even the texture in their mouth. It can feel so extreme for them, compared to the neurotypical person. But when you find what works, then you begin to build around it. If you find out that your child is so interested in birds, for instance, then it means that when you're teaching the alphabet, you may even want to start giving examples with birds that start with the sound ah, or birds that start with the sound b, and so on, right? If the child is so interested in animals, then you come from that side. If they are so interested in colors, you come from that side. So that's why the advantage of you knowing the child cannot be taken for granted. I wanted to share this material again. So this is a sample from the practical life curriculum. And what is it about? We have the zip, open and close. Now, this is a material in the classroom. Do you need this material at home? Well, you have zips in your house. So show your child, when they are dressing up, to be able to, and even when they are not dressing up, it means that if they want to play, because this is something that a child can work with in a classroom or play with in a classroom, it means that if your child wants to play and you give them a jacket, maybe that is strapped somewhere, they can easily open it and close it. They will actually be very excited, right? So there is materials everywhere in your house, outside your house, in the environment. There's learning to be learned everywhere. I say every subject can be found in nature and in your house. So what you need to know as the prepared adult is, what are these subjects in the first place? What do I even need to be teaching my child? Because sometimes we're not familiar with most of the subjects beyond the ones that we learned in school, and how to even convey this message to our children. It just looks like something so strange and different, for us to handle. But one of the things I cover in the curriculum for 0 to 3 to 6 years, and you see that some of these things are not rocket science; they're just real life activities. It is well to be able to teach the child, and you see, um, looking at the materials, you begin to see that, oh, these are all the things the child can learn from this material. I had a video where I talked about planting beans and all the mathematical lessons you can learn from planting beans, right? Some might see it and say, these people have come again. How is planting beans connected to mathematics, right? But when you begin to break it down, you see how beneficial it is. So that's why that knowledge is very key, and even more than the materials itself. Then chapter 6 talks about following the child and autism, right? How important it is to follow the child. Following the child is a common concept in the Montessori method, where we say, oh, follow the child, follow what they're doing. It doesn't mean if the child just runs free and there's no direction. You need to work with the curriculum. You need to work with a plan that, okay, in this year, I want the child to cover so and so topics. But of course, while you have that in mind as a guide, you're also going to be looking out for their sensitive periods. What are they interested in? And then when you see that interest, you build on it, and then you use it to introduce the other topics that the child may not even be showing interest in, because sometimes they haven't shown interest in something because they haven't been exposed to it. If your child is only listening to a particular kind of music because you're only playing a particular kind, you can't tell whether they will like. If they're always listening to classical, how will you know if they like jazz if they've never heard jazz before, right? So that's why exposure is key. So following the child, using your journals for tracking, for keeping records, and seeing, oh, today they showed that they were interested in certain things, or I noticed they started liking colors. That is usually very helpful, and that what it means to follow the child, follow their developmental needs, and move at their pace rather than at the pace somebody else is trying to define for you. Of course, milestones and typical expectations are good as a guide, so that you know when there might be a deviation or there might be something you need to work on, right? But ultimately, you work with the child that you have and that you're seeing in front of you. Managing choice and freedom was chapter 7. And in the Montessori classroom, one of the things that is common there is you have materials on the shelf, and then the child is free to go and pick. Let's say if the pink tower is on one side, the child can say, oh, I want to arrange these blocks, arrange them, put them back. That's what I want to do this morning. And then they start working with it, right? Some other times, of course, the child might be guided. The teacher can meet the child and say, oh, today I want to show you how to, maybe based on the child's age, right? Or some interest the child has shown. The teacher might say, I want to show you how to, some of the colors that we have, or I want to show you some letters and some of those kind of things, right? But ultimately, there's that freedom of choice. Now, in the book, the author Rachel was talking about how sometimes that's excessive choice, even having more like three or four items on the shelf can be too much, can be overwhelming for the child. It is now helpful to narrow it down. You can put only 2 items. So that's why one of the things you want to manage is clutter. So it's not about having too many toys out. It's not the more toys you have, the busier they will be. Sometimes you just need 1 or 2, per time. And every other thing should be either arranged on shelves somewhere else and closed away to reduce distraction and to make sure that that one they can see, they can pick from it, right? So it's very important you manage their choice and freedom and guide them on decision making over time. It's a skill that they can also build. Chapter 8 was talking about grace and courtesy lessons and children with autism spectrum disorder. So one of the subject areas that we have, part of practical life, is grace and courtesy. And then for the infant, so infants and toddlers and 2-year-olds, that's 0 to 3-year-olds, is under, you'll find that under social skills. So in the Montessori curriculum, social skills are deliberately taught. It's actually a subject area. So you can find that you're teaching a child, oh, this is how you sneeze, right? Of course, you might have this in other methodologies, teaching the child to sneeze this way as part of classroom management skills, right? But sometimes as parents in the house, we may not even realize that these are things you can teach the child. We might just be getting upset that the child is doing a certain thing. Meanwhile, we've never taught that skill. We just assume that, how can someone even be doing this type of thing, right? Or she shared an example, can't remember if it was in this same chapter, of how, the child was just interrupting her. And it's very easy to get exasperated. Like, can't you see that I'm talking to somebody, right? It's like the moment you start talking, that's when they want to come and start telling you all the stories. And if you're not listening, it's a tantrum waiting to happen, right? But as human beings new to the world, even a few years into the world, how are they really meant to know that, okay, this is not how you interrupt people, this is not how you talk, this is what you can do, right? So I think she explained how she taught the child to say excuse me politely and then just wait by the side. In some classrooms you also have, they'll say put your hand on my shoulder, and then maybe I'll just nod and then I'll respond to you in a minute so that I don't lose my train of thought, right? So there are so many ways you can teach them to interrupt you. But if you just assume that, okay, they should know better, like, can't you see that I'm talking? They can see, and then what? Right? So just knowing that, so these grace and courtesy lessons, social skills lessons are taught very deliberately so that even, whether the child is neurotypical or has special needs, they can benefit from it. And then sometimes as individual lessons, sometimes as group lessons, even teaching a child how to answer the phone. I usually tell the parents in the academy, when you want to teach your child, you have to be excited, even if you're not a naturally excited person. Sometimes I'll just say, "Oh, come, I'm going to teach you how to answer the phone today." And it's like you're turning something that might not be so interesting into an interesting thing. It all depends on how you present it, right? You have to be cheerful, you have to be excited, even if it's not exciting in your mind, right? Or today I'm going to show you how to zip up your dress. Right? You don't want to make it work. You don't want it to be when they are in the peak of trying to go out. You be like, just put your hand. You're already how many years old? You should know how to do this by now. It doesn't happen by magic. Yes, they have absorbent minds. Yes, they see what we are doing, but there are some skills that just need to be taught or they need to be guided. And you have to be patient to be aware of it, and even make some of those just little guidance that they need most of the time. Exposure to the right materials. If everything, when I talk about the prepared environment, if everything is out of their reach, both the ones that are dangerous and the ones that are safe, they are out of their reach just based on design, then of course they're going to be asking you for help with everything. But when you realize that you can teach certain skills, it becomes very helpful for them and even for you as the parent or the teacher. So chapter 9 was talking about understanding and responding to triggers. Now, understanding and responding to triggers, we all have triggers in different ways. When we have special needs children, we also look at um, how to respond to the triggers that they might have. What are those things that might set them off? For example, if someone cannot speak well, and even children before they start talking, you find that it's very easy for them to just have tantrums because they can't communicate what they want. They are feeling hot, they are feeling this, they can't even say it, their body is just itching them. You are just playing detective and you don't even realize why they're acting the way they're acting. Maybe you were already tired from your own work that day, and it's just like, what is even happening, right? So she shared some skills. She said, some of what the triggers. First of all, you have to track them, right, with the journal. Um, watch when they get upset. What are the things that are getting them upset? Even watching the time of the day can be very key. Sometimes you might just realize that this is always happening in the morning or this is always happening at bedtime, right? But if you don't take notes, you might see it as every day this child is just doing this and doing that, right? And if you cannot track it, you can't improve it, right? What you don't measure, you can't improve. You can't even try to support it, you can't address it or whatever it is. So tracking is very key. And then she shared two strategies for responding to triggers. So there's avoidance and then there is coping skills. Now, avoidance is talking about being able to avoid triggers. So if someone is triggered by noise, that means you want to be avoiding all the noisy places, right? Now, that is not so practical because sometimes they are going to be in a noisy place. So she had given an example of using headphones, not necessarily with music, but just something that can reduce the noise, right? Because of course, if you put music, that can be another risk or hazard if someone is walking on the way or something of that nature. So certain things like if you have allergies or food intolerances or maybe some textures that they can't just tolerate, it's very easy to avoid that, right? If it's a nutritional need, you can put in alternatives for it. But for certain things that you know that they're going to face in everyday life, you want to help them build that skill. And of course, the easiest time to build such skills is in early childhood when they are still learning the world, they are learning coping skills, right? Something she shared in the book, one of the chapters that struck me is, when we teach them coping skills early, then they don't have to form their own coping skills, which might now be something that we don't find that will not be acceptable, right? If their coping skill when something happens is to scream, right? They have developed that skill is screaming or doing a repetitive behavior, that just helps them to feel calm. that is what they'll be doing, right? But if you're able to teach them, even at an early age, or once you notice and you teach them that, see, this is something you can do when you feel this way, you even give them the wordings. And to be honest, even with neurotypical children, who don't have any visible developmental disability, learning how to cope with different emotional situations, different ways they might be feeling can be so helpful. A child might know that they are frustrated, and then what? They want to scream, they want to shout. But sometimes when you tell them, oh, you can take deep breaths, or you can tell the next person you're having a conflict with that I feel so and so way when you do this. You see, it actually helps them to feel somewhat calmer, because it's like, oh, I can actually say something, right? I don't have to scream, because my natural response is just to scream and be frustrated, right? So it's very helpful when we teach them sometimes specific wordings to use, specific things to do, having a calming corner, a peace corner. These are all small things that can be helpful, instead of just, time out, leave my space, I don't want to see you, I can't deal with all this stress right now. We give them actual skills that they can use to cope with whatever triggers that they're experiencing, whatever challenges that they are dealing with, right? So, and then another thing she pointed out was solving problems after the fact. So after a tantrum, after a meltdown, after whatever it is, and again, this applies even to all children in general, right? Being able to walk through, okay, what happened, right? You were crying so long and you didn't. She shared an example. You cried so much you missed the arts and crafts class, right? Or you were doing this and then you couldn't participate in so and so activity. So what can we do different next time? What made you feel that way? How can you try, do you know about so and so, practice? Do you know you can actually move out and come back? Do you know you can jump around? Right? Sharing some tips that they can now use the next time you're equipping them, with their toolbox. Right? So I think that was a very, very for me, that was a very important chapter, understanding triggers and how to manage it. And then the conclusion was, the concluding chapter, chapter 10, was saying that children with autism and any, to me, any special need actually, just like all children, have amazing potential, really. And the Montessori method allows these potentials to be unlocked, to be harnessed, to be everything, because you have so many opportunities to expose them to different approaches, different materials. I didn't even share, still talking on materials. I love the materials. They're so beautiful, really. And you don't have to buy them or all of them, except you're doing, full-time homeschooling. That is what you're doing. And maybe you have like a whole community you're working with, because sometimes the materials tend to be expensive. But of course, when you have multiple children you're working with, and if you're not doing this in your home, right, then you're going to have to need some standard materials to work with the children. So these are the sandpaper letters, where the child can trace. I've shared this in a number of videos. The child can trace the letters. It gives that sensorial feeling. Reminds me of Helen Keller, that they were tracing sign language, on her palm. That was really something else, right? And then trying to teach our children how to brush their teeth, for example, in practical life. Now, this came from a dentist kit. I think it's Melissa and Dog or so. So I just brought this out. The dentist kit has so many parts. I just picked this part out, and then I put a real toothbrush. So what the activity is just putting some brown marker to make it dirty, then using water and having them go around and around, right? So you show that the tongue, you can brush the tongue, you can brush, you show it in practical terms. Of course, they can also watch you brushing. It's very nice when children brush beside you. And one of the parts about how Montessori can be so tangible is, even before the child starts writing, for instance, a child can identify basic letters. So these are magnetic letters. I know in one of my videos I also shared Play-Doh letters, so to speak, right? So one of the signature approaches of Montessori is making it tangible. So letters, you can be playing around with letters. So even before your hands can hold the pen very well and write, you can already recognize that this is letter A that makes the R sound, right? And this is letter C that makes the C sound. So if you learn the letter sounds and you want to start writing in quotes, you can arrange these letters on the floor and make the word cat, right? That is a writing activity. So that tangibility means that even a child that is not able to hold the pen very well for one reason or the other can begin to write letters. Even a child that is not yet speaking but can hear the sounds, right, can learn the sounds, is able to write also. So again, going back to focusing on what the child can do other than what the child cannot do is very, very key. That's one thing I really wanted to point out. Right. So in talking in the concluding chapter, she was like, what is next, right? So you would have to decide, do you want to homeschool your child? Are you already homeschooling them? Are they in mainstream school? How do you want to incorporate the Montessori method in your home with your child, right? You can choose to, one of the things would be to learn more about the Montessori method, learn about the founder, right? The person that developed the approach, Dr. Maria Montessori. There's so many materials about her. Try and follow a curriculum, because when you follow a curriculum, it means you have, okay, that general goal for the year, over a period of 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. And then every year you have, okay, this is what you want to cover per month. So for example, that's what we do in the program, right? We have this month we're going to look at language. This month we're going to look at sensorial. Sensorial is really like mathematics because it's talking about the senses, but then like the geometric solids I was sharing, this is a cylinder. So you're looking at the sensorial aspect. But again, down the line, you're going to be looking at how it's a cylinder and how it has volume, area, and all those other details, right? So you're also going to have a month with mathematics, a month with practical life, a month with this. So the good thing is that you get to go through all the subject areas, right? You do it for 4 weeks, you learn more about it, and you begin to see everyday life activities within your own home, like without even the things you're already doing, but now being more aware of it is just so wonderful because with it you're not even stressing about, like I normally say when I'm having lessons for my kids, lessons in quotes, we have it in a playroom just in this room here, and I might just say, oh, I noticed that our older one was showing interest in writing, and then I'll just have a board. Okay, she can trace something there, or the other one is showing interest in making beads or working with beads, and I just put it by the side, and that is it. She'll do what she needs to do, and they've learned what they need to learn. No stress, right? Because that knowledge is there, because that skill is there, right? Of course, I know. Yes, I trained as the full certified Montessori educator, and the parent is not going through that same training. However, my goal is usually to break it down in the simplest form so that you can immediately begin to see, that's one of the feedback I got from the parents in the academy. Begin to see how, learning is such a simple play-based thing. It doesn't have to be so rigid. You don't have to sit at the table all the time, except it's a writing activity or reading activity where you're trying to build, some of those posture and some other skills. So yeah, ultimately, choose to follow a curriculum, learn more about the method, become a prepared adult, join our program, of course, develop a prepared environment. Let your home, your home is the perfect classroom already. Don't try to turn your home into a classroom, because the classrooms are copying our homes. They are copying our environment. So the home includes both indoors and outside as well, right? So I think ultimately we've been able to cover basically what we have for today. And I think hopefully it was very helpful to somebody, to some people, and even those who are going to watch a replay. I hope you find this helpful. If you have any questions, we still have a few minutes to receive that, to entertain that. If you have any comments, I'm very happy to see that as well. And please make sure you share this with somebody you think can benefit from it. If you have ever been wondering if Montessori is right for your child, maybe they have a special need or the other, and you're concerned about it, I think really Montessori, again, was really founded based on her working with special needs children, and also realizing that it worked for even children that did not have special needs. So now it's more about implementation, how you, the parent, is able to prepare yourself, understand certain things, and begin to implement it, with that positive mindset, keeping your head up, keeping your chin up, keeping your eyes on the light and not on the shadows that are on the ground, right? So I'm really happy you all joined in. Any comments, questions, feel free to put them in. I'll put some more helpful links in the description or in the chat. Yeah, I can't wait to start with you too, Dr. Joy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, put them in. I'm so happy to entertain that. So I'll just check, make sure there are no outstanding. If you're part of our group, and maybe because we're about to end the session now, you can also put your questions there. But if you put it in comments in this video, I will equally respond later on. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Thank you for joining, and we'll connect again next Monday. I have some exciting. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Fisayo. We have an exciting announcement next week. We have a book coming out. I'm so excited for it. We have a book finally. we've had our journal already, but yeah, this is also Montessori based. So look out for it next week. Hopefully that will be announced as we talk about the launching of the book. So take care, everyone, and share this with somebody that you think would benefit. And until next time, have a good day, have a good week ahead. Bye, everyone.